Welcome to another episode of Becoming the Man Project. I'm your host, Eric Finister. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you to my new fans. I know I have the United States, I have France, and now I see people in Japan are tuning in. So thank you to everyone that tunes in, everyone that listens, the likes, the comments, the subscribers. Appreciate all of it. Typically, I do every Monday. I release an episode every Monday, but I felt led to do one today, like a impromptu episode. So we're just gonna dive right on in. You guys know I don't like to waste any time, so let's just dive in. Um, Discipline, fasting, having structure. These are things we need, man. We need to be disciplined. We need to have structure. We need all those type of things, and we can develop those things from fasting. A lot of times people fast in hopes that they get something from God, or that God does something for them, which He can. But the purpose of fasting is for you, the person that's fasting. I was having a talk with my brother a couple of years ago, and he told me the reason why. He's like, Eric, the reason why I'm able to say no, why I'm as disciplined as I am, is it's because of all the fasting I've done. He's done a lot of different fasting, um, him and his church, and I took them, like, okay, because, growing up, okay, I'm going to fast so God could do this. I'm going to fast so God could do that. Now, don't get me wrong. I've seen God show up, on my behalf, and particular things, protected me from things, situations from my fasting. But to say that I'm going to fast 3 days for a car, I'm going to fast 3 days for a house. It's like yes and no, you know? Um, but yeah, fasting, discipline, structure. Growing up, um, fasting it was something I learned. It wasn't something I knew about, early on. It wasn't until I started attending the church that I go to now that I'm now the pastor of, is when I was first introduced to fasting. And man, I tell you, it was tough. I remember one time the church we went on a soup and salad fast. Oh my goodness, that was tough. And I don't think I know it. And like during that time, I even cheated here and there, here and there because it was so much. Like I think like a slice of apple pie, or I remember one time being at school, forgetting I'm fasting. Someone let me, oh, try this. I tried it. I liked it. And I'm like, I'm chewing, mid chew. Uh-oh. Oh, you don't like it? No, I do like it. I had to go spit it out because, fasting. But these things, you do at a young age, and it begins to develop a discipline. It develops a structure. I fast a lot. And I'm not talking about fasting for health benefits. I'm talking about spiritual fasting. It's more than just reframing from food. It's more than just that. While fasting is, prayer time, reading the scriptures, seeking God, getting in that quiet space, so God can speak, give you downloads, give you instructions. I kid you not. Um, the way God has changed and structured my life around fasting is just like, man, there's not a month that goes by literally now where I'm not fasting. That's just the structure uh, that God has developed in me and the discipline. Because it's not easy to go on a fast when mom's is cooking, wife is cooking, barbecue, you know, uh, these different holidays. I love barbecue, so it's not easy to have to sit there and smell the different aromas of food and all that. But there's something that's being developed on the inside, something that that's positioning you to a new place that you don't even know. I remember in high school. I remember in high school, and me and my friend, my best friend at the time, we said we were going to fast for our wives. We both were single. We said, no, we're going to fast for our wives. Um, I think we fasted for months at a time. And if you guys listen to previous episodes, you know that I was the type that like God, I want to be one done, and I want to meet her, marry her, have kids, live happily ever after. That definitely was not the case for me. About fasting for my wife, fasting for my wife. As I got older, okay, I'm gonna fast for the young men in the church. Men that's connected to me, the young teenagers that's connected to me. I'm gonna fast for them. That God do something for them. So fasting is, for one, it creates discipline. But then you can fast on the behalf of someone else. I remember I was talking with Apostle Horton, the guy who I just interviewed in the last episode, from gang chief to apostle. He fasted for one of his church members, who is now my wife. He fasted for her. Something was going on with the job. He went on a fast, and God turned the whole thing around for her. You know, we fight spiritually. I don't fight with my fist, and all that. I get on my knees and I pray and I fast, and that's how God moves on my behalf. Um, but yeah, so not only does it create a discipline for you, because in the Bible, the Bible says that some things you can only do by fasting and praying. You know, when Jesus was able to cast out the demon, and the disciples were like, "How are you able to do that? Why can't we do that?" Well, some things only come by fasting and praying. Some things you can only do by fasting and praying. But it creates that discipline. It gets that structure. It puts you in a place to where now it's like I'm more disciplined. I have more self control. I can say no. I can turn away from my flesh. You know, uh, I'm not easily influenced. These are things that can develop over time, obviously, from fasting. I think it's very important, especially for men, young men. There's a lot of temptations out there. A lot. We have the social media, right? Just that alone, um, ads, right? Billboards, music, movies, all that. Temptation is everywhere. And I can guarantee, if you would develop a lifestyle of fasting, again, this is not, I'm not talking about fasting to lose weight and being healthy. I'm talking about spiritually. I can guarantee if you were to, take that seriously and fast on a consistent basis, you would begin to see the change. You would begin to see you'll notice yourself like, oh, that doesn't affect me anymore. Oh, I'm not tempted by that. Oh, I'm not bothered by that. I've noticed I've overcome that. Oh, it's not really affecting me like that from fasting. And it's really, really important. We want to be able to overcome. We want to be able to give in to every single thing, right? Every form of temptation, every form of lust. We want to be able to overcome, persevere, push through, fight, right? And we want to essentially get to a point to where it's not even an issue. Where now it's like, okay, the enemy has to come through with something else because that's not working anymore. fasting is really important and it's key. And it's really, I guess I can, say I am who I am, where I am today because of how much I have fasted, I've put into fasting, things like that. So if you don't fast, start fasting. And here's the thing, you don't announce it to the world. Oh, I'm hungry, I'm fast. Like, oh, I'm tired, I'm fasting. No, you do it in your secret place. You don't have to share it to the world that you're fasting. A lot of times, my wife, she won't know, unless God give me like instructions for the future. Um, like, oh, God told me, from this day forward, fast this day, outside something like that. Um, a lot of times my wife won't even know, she'll pick up on it, if I'm by myself or if she knows I'm not eating. Are you fasting? So even that's how serious it is to not really share that, that you're fasting, because it's private. It's between you and the Lord, what you do is secret, God will reward you in the open, openly. Um, and then with fasting, you know, God will begin to speak to you, tell you things, download things to you. And in that moment, trust, trust Him, trust the Lord. What's the scripture? Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not to your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge Him, and He will direct your path. You will begin to see, in the passing time, Him speak to you. He give you very strategic, specific instructions. And sometimes it's unique. It's out of the ordinary. It's uncommon. And it can be scary. It could be scary. I've been there. I am there now. I'm living it. It can be scary, but trust Him. Trust in the Lord. You have to have that trust that, what He's giving to you in those moments that you're fasting, that He has your best interest. It could be something as simple as apologizing to someone who you didn't even realize you offended. You could be fasting, God tells you, you need to go to apologize to that person. And it could be something as simple as that. But it could be something as major, as serious as God telling you quit your job. You know, that's drastic, right? Something as simple as offering an apology or forgiving someone, but something as major as quitting your job or moving out of state, things like that. But you have to trust in the Lord, that He has your best interest. If He tells you quit your job, then know that He has provision for you. I'm gonna share something with you. About a week ago, almost a week and a half ago, God told me three things. He told me no more delay, right? No more restrictions and no more blockages. That's what He told me. I'm like, okay, I'm excited. And then He gives me a scripture, Ezekiel 12, verse 28. I read that. I'm like, oh, okay, God. Let's talk about no delay. He's fulfilling what He said, all these things. So I am excited. I'm happy, right? The next day. And mind you, all this comes from me fasting, spending time with God, right? Being in His presence, seeking Him, having that relationship with God because, you fast so much, it becomes consistent that now you have developed this relationship with God where He just drops things in your spirit like that, right? So the very next day, I'm driving home from church, windows rolled up all the way up, right? It's not a convertible, so I have a ceiling. and I began to feel rain, like a raindrop here. I'm like, "What was that?" And then I'm like, "Is that a bug?" And I pull down my mirror. I'm looking like, no, if it was a bug, I'll feel it crawling somewhere, right? Then I feel another drop, right? I'm like, "Oh, God, what's going on?" Okay, you got my attention now. What's going on? He says simply, "I'm honoring your request." And I tell you, I'm excited. I'm happy. I cannot wait to get home to tell my wife, the experience I had. Here's the thing. I get home, I tell her, what I experienced. Her response to me was she had the same experience. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Wait a minute. So yes, she had the same experience. Now she has a head full of hair, right? So obviously she wouldn't feel a water drop hit her head, right? She felt it on her foot. The same thing that I felt. She felt it, we're apart. She's at home, with the baby. I'm at church. She feel it earlier that morning. I feel it on my way home. We felt the raindrops, right? We felt the rain. So this comes, God speaks, no more delays, no more restrictions, no more blockages. He gives me equals 12:28. And then I experience the rain, right? But it doesn't stop there. Now, I'm not one to over spiritualize anything at all, by no means. I also don't believe in coincidences, not at all. After God speaks, the no restrictions, no delays, no blockages, gives me the scripture. I experienced the rain. Now I am in full fledged expectation. Okay, God, what you about to do? I am looking, because I know my request, the request that I've laid before Him. I know what I want Him to do. You know, um, so I'm looking like, hey, how you gonna do it? In which way? Because in my mindset, it can only be one of three ways that this all goes down. And I have, like my number one, my number two, my number three, ranked on how I would like for him to honor my request. Needless to say, if he's going to honor it, he's going to honor it however he wants to honor it, but he lets me know he's honoring my request, right? So I get to work on Friday. All right. Now, depending on where you park at my job, water may drip on your car, but it's never a lot. It's like a few drops here and there. For whatever reason, so much water was just dripping, 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 dripping on my car. Right. I'm like, wow, it's like my whole windshield just drops. Like it was like separated drops. The left side, like the driver's side, the middle side, and then the passenger side. I'm like, okay, God, you have my time and expectation. I cannot wait for you to just come through. Right. Then the next day, Saturday, I live down the street from a park. I literally walked the park. There's like a trail. I walked the trail. It's about a mile. Um, I think I did like half a mile. I didn't do the full thing. And as I'm coming home, right, sun is out. It's hot. We're in summer. But what begins to happen? Raindrops. And now at this point, I'm like, okay, God, you, I'm just waiting. I'm staying in expectations. It just keeps me in expectation all the more. Right. And so then, after that, it's like I've had experience after experience after experience. And this is all while I'm fasting. Right. Like I told you earlier, I fast a lot. Every month I'm fasting, and it's not for weight loss and that. These are spiritual fasting. So obviously, if I'm fasting spiritually, I'm going to experience something spiritual, right? I'm going to experience something supernatural. Um, so after that, I kid you not, this happened just yesterday. So, like I said, I'm in a very unique season right now. God is definitely up to something. He's really operating uncommon, out the ordinary. unique, different, and sometimes it does bring on a fear because I know what my requests are. I know what my request is, and I can see that he's honoring it, but it's scary all at the same time. So yesterday, I go to the bank, make a deposit, come back home. God tells me, as I'm sitting there, don't get out your car just yet, just wait. I'm like, okay. So I'm playing my gospel music. I was playing Manifestation. Yeah, I think that's the song I was listening to at the moment. Um, and out of nowhere, a bird flies on my side mirror. Right, a bird flies on my side mirror. Um, and it's looking at me. I'm looking at it, and it has a worm in its mouth. Right now, it does this whole thing. It's turning around, looking at me, turning around, looking at me. I see the worm, and then it flies away. Now you may be saying, "Okay, Eric, so what? You seen a bird with a worm?" But you have to understand what that means spiritually, what it represents spiritually. I believe it was the prophet Elijah, not Elisha, where God sent the raven to feed him, right? God sent the bird. We know a raven is a bird to feed the prophet, right? In that moment, God was letting me know, Eric, I am going to provide. I'm going to bring forth the provision. And I sat there. I'm just like, I just smiled, like, and I laughed, like, God, um, at this point, I'm just for a lost of words, But you can experience these different experiences, you know, these different moments with God from living that disciplined lifestyle, um, coming from fasting. If you're all work, 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 never spending time with God, never being intentional with spending time with Him, when would you really ever have time to have an experience like that? You have to be intentional. We have to take it very, very serious. And I take it seriously. And I absolutely love those moments with God. I love them because it's just like, wow. I'd be looking for the supernatural. I'd be looking for the unexplained, unimaginable, out of the ordinary type things with God. Because, people tend to put God in a box, and by doing that, you know, um, if you put God in a box, then you're limiting your expectation on what it is He can and can't do. I don't put God in a box because I know He can do infinitely more than what I can imagine or think. Bible says He can do exceedingly, abundantly, above all we can actually think of. That's one of the things I pray for. That's Ephesians 3:20. I pray, I'm like, God, I'm looking for you to do infinitely. I'm looking for you to do infinitely more. I'm looking for you to exceed my expectations. You know, um, and all this fasting. You can experience these things. If you never fasted a day in your life, you know, I would say, start small. You don't have to jump into a 3-day, no water, no food fast. Start off small. That's what I did. And then gradually, you'll be able to do the quote unquote big fast or the more harder fast. But here's the thing, even with the fasts that sound hard, seem hard, difficult, if God has truly called you to do that type of fast, you'd be surprised at, not to say it won't be difficult, but you'll be surprised how easy it is to actually go through with the fast. I remember maybe 6 months to a year ago, I was doing a fast because I had to preach. In the last 3 days, God told me just water, just just do water. and that sounds crazy, right? Like, oh, next 2 days, all I can do is drink water. But it's just crazy how easy, you know, that fast was. Not to say it didn't bring on any difficulties, because obviously, not having anything but water, we got stairs in my house going up and down the stairs. I even went on a walk. Why? I don't know, because I was exhausted and tired and feeling weak afterwards. Things like that happens, yes, but essentially it was quite easy, or easier than what I expected. And so don't let fear stop you from fasting, trying to fast, starting to fast. Um, Try it out. And again, I have to reiterate, I'm not referring to the weight loss fast, or, doing it for health benefits. I'm not talking about that. Obviously, there are health benefits to fasting, but I mean, going into it with the mind of, I'm doing this for God. I'm doing this to get closer to God. I'm doing this so this can create that discipline in me that I need, Um, 'Cause a lot of times, man, we lack discipline. We lack structure. And oftentimes it comes from the environment where we're raised in, right? The lack of the positive role models and the positive influences, generational curses, all of things play a part. But if you're watching this today, I've just given you a secret. That's not a secret. Start fasting and really watch how God moves on your behalf. I mean, and not only that, watch what develops inside of you. That's the thing. Yes, God can move. Yes, God can do a lot from your fasting, but watch what he does in you and how you become a much greater person, than you are. You'll see change, right? You'll see, God just change everything about you. And then you hear people like, oh, you've changed. There's something different about you. Then you'll stop going places you have no business going. You'll stop doing things you have no business doing. Bad habits begin to break. God will begin to give you strategic instructions. He'll give you things, tell you things, show you things that you didn't even know were there. That he'll bring to your attention. You're like, oh wow, this is why my grandfather did this, my dad did this, and why I'm doing it. But I can cut it here now that I know. Things like that. But if you don't give God the time, how are you ever gonna know? I use this example a lot. It's just like with dating. When we're dating, right, we're intentional. At least I was intentional with um, planning dates, flowers, opening doors, phone calls. Very intentional, setting time aside, sacrificing time, sacrificing sleep, you know, to spend that quality time with who I'm pursuing. It's the same way with God. Set aside that quiet time, be intentional, turn your phone off, right? Set aside that time with God, pray, read His Word, and just sit in silence and allow Him to speak to you. But if you lack discipline, you lack structure, you're not fasting, then you're just like drifting aimlessly. It all comes down to having that relationship with God. Because you have a relationship with God, you will develop a lifestyle of fasting. I won't even say a lifestyle of fasting, but you will develop that fasting quality, for lack of a better word. You will You will develop discipline, self-control, all these different things. You'll have a complete different way about how you go about things. So I would challenge men and even the women that's listening. I would challenge you guys to start fasting and being intentional. Challenge yourself. Challenge yourself. When I said earlier about, not jumping into, um, like a no water or a food fast, that's for, I would use that like for kids, like telling a kid or teenager, don't just jump into something like that, especially if you never fasted, but your limits, right? You know what's a challenge for you, right? We all love to eat, right? Don't we all love to? I know I do. I love to eat. So, being setting aside 12 hours a day, from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., I'm not going to eat, but I'm going to use that time praying, reading my word, spending time with God, you know, and then that increases. I'm at a place in my life now to where, you know, if God is leading me to a fast, um, if he's unctioning me or, telling me I'm gonna be fasting soon, immediately I'll start doing the 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. or in my case, 4 to 4, because I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. Um, just to get my body ready, to get my mind ready for the fast. There's been some, fasts where it's just like, oh, tomorrow you're gonna fast. And it's like, oh, okay. I'll wake up, oh, you're gonna fast today, well, okay, God. That does happen. But people who have never fasted a day in their life, prepare yourself, prepare your mind, your body, to fast. But yeah, I would challenge every one of you who listen to this today. I would challenge you to at least start off with a 3-day fast. For the more seasoned people, I would say start with a 7-day fast. You have to start somewhere. And I promise you, God honors your effort. You know, um, one thing, one saying that gets thrown around, tossed around, people love to say, God knows my heart. He knows my heart. He knows my heart. Yes, he does. So much so that he knows when you're trying and when you're really not trying, when you're just saying that just to get by. Oh, God knows my heart. Yes, he does. And we forget that he knows us better than we know ourselves. So he knows when we're really trying or we're just trying to look for a shortcut and just get out, take it serious. I dare you. Whoever listens, today's Tuesday and I'm gonna post this today because I felt led like God wanted me to do the same. I didn't even know why. I didn't even have a topic. It wasn't until like maybe an hour and a half ago, I said fasting. I'm like, well, all right, that's what we're gonna do. Um, but yeah, I would challenge anyone who's watching this today, fast. Next 3 days, next 7 days, really try it. Like be intentional, be serious about it. If you have any questions or any want some advice or even prayer requests, you can email becomingthemanproject@gmail.com. If you have questions, comments, statements, need advice, need prayer. I'm a pastor. Those who don't know me, I'm a prophet. I have no problem with praying for you, giving you advice, anything. Um, but this is going to conclude today's episode. This is episode 7 of Becoming the Man Project. Again, shout out to all my listeners, the new subscribers, the listeners out here in the United States, the listeners out there in France, and listeners out there in Japan. Thank you all for rocking with me and listening, and just being a part of this journey. Until next time, I'll see you guys later.